never stop reading Bible. So after years of war, after all the stunning victories, the conquest of Canaan is finally winding down. But here's the thing, winning the war, that was just step one. Now, let's get into the really fascinating part, the incredible story of how they took this conquered land and actually started to build a nation. And that's the central question, isn't it? It's so much more than just drawing some lines on a map. We're talking about building a society from the ground up, making sure it's fair, and getting people motivated to create a future. This was a monumental task of nation building, and it all started with a single leader who was getting on in years. Yeah, that leader was Joshua, and by this point, he's an old man. And even though the major enemy armies had been crushed, there were still these pockets of land that weren't quite under Israel's control. So the job, it wasn't completely finished. And this is where things get really interesting. God gives Joshua a command, and it's kind of wild. He basically says, don't wait. Start handing out all the land now. And that included the areas they hadn't even fully subdued yet. I mean, think about that. It was a massive act of faith, really, setting the vision for the nation before it was a complete reality on the ground. So where do you even start with a task that big? Well, the first major piece of this puzzle was actually put into place a little earlier by Moses himself, over on the east side of the Jordan River. And this first allocation would basically serve as the model for the much bigger jobs still to come. So here's how that first chunk of land was organized. The southern region went to the tribe of Reuben. The central part, that went to Gad. And the northern territory was given to half of the tribe of Manasseh. A really clear, structured division for those first 2.5 tribes. But there was one tribe that got a completely different kind of deal. And that was the tribe of Levi, the priestly tribe. See, they didn't get any specific territory to call their own. While all the other tribes were inheriting land, the Levites' inheritance was their sacred duty, their actual service to God. It was a brilliant way to set them apart for their special purpose inside the nation. Okay, so let's jump across to the west side of the Jordan, because this is where the main event happens. With that precedent set in the east, it was time to divide the heartland of Canaan among the other 9.5 tribes. But to do it fairly, they needed a system that everyone could trust. That system was the casting of lots. Now, don't think of this like rolling dice or some game of chance. In the ancient world, this was seen as the way to take human greed and politics out of the decision. The idea was to let divine guidance make the final call. It was all about making sure the distribution was seen as fair and God-ordained, which would hopefully stop any arguments before they could even begin. And you can imagine this had a really powerful psychological effect. By giving each tribe a specific, divinely appointed inheritance, a piece of land with their name on it, it gave them all the motivation they needed to go out and finish the job, to settle their territory and make it their home. But you know, right in the middle of all this large-scale national planning, the story zooms in on something deeply personal. It's a story of faithfulness and a promise made decades earlier to a man named Caleb. At this point, Caleb is 85 years old. Just think about that for a second. He's one of only 2 men from his entire generation who left Egypt and survived those 40 years in the wilderness to see this day. He was a living, breathing link to the very beginning of the journey. And he comes to Joshua not with some faint memory, but with a bold claim. He reminds Joshua of the promise made to him all those years ago when he returned from spying out the land and gave a good, faithful report. His faith hadn't wavered one bit, and he says his strength hadn't either. He was ready to claim his reward. And this just perfectly illustrates how the whole system was supposed to work. Joshua blesses him and grants his request. Caleb is given the city of Hebron, which was a challenging place, for sure, but also incredibly valuable. And this sent a powerful message to the entire nation. Individual faithfulness to God would be remembered, and it would be rewarded. So, with Caleb's personal inheritance taken care of, the formal division by lot begins, and they start with one of the largest and most powerful tribes of them all, the tribe of Judah. And Judah received a massive and really strategic territory. Its boundaries stretched from the desert in the south all the way across to the Mediterranean Sea in the west and over to the Dead Sea in the east. This was a huge piece of land, a fitting inheritance for a leading tribe. So the map is drawn, the territory is assigned. But this brings us right back to that little tension we started with. Does having a line on a map actually mean you control the ground? The answer was no, not yet. right in the heart of Judah's new territory was a formidable stronghold, Jerusalem, which was occupied by the Jebusites. And Judah's forces just could not drive them out. This piece of unfinished business would stay a thorn in Israel's side for centuries, until King David finally conquered the city and made it his capital.
So what can we take away from all this? Well, the division of the land gives us this fascinating blueprint for building a nation. It all starts with acting in faith on a divine command. It relies on a fair system to keep the peace. It makes room to honor personal faithfulness. And, crucially, it acknowledges the hard truth that a vision isn't the same as a completed job. The map was drawn, but the real work of possessing the land, that had only just begun.
So the blueprint was laid out, a plan, a process, and a promise. But as the story shows, drawing the map is one thing, actually possessing the territory is another. And that's a foundational challenge for a nation just beginning its journey. This analysis was brought to you by the Center Studio.